Hi, this is Patrice Steller, and this is my video explaining my plan of instruction based on my literacy inquiry. My literacy inquiry comes from my experience teaching both second grade and 7th, 8th, and ninth grade students, or what we call our junior high. When I taught second grade, my students were very motivated, very excited about reading. So I was very surprised when I transitioned to teaching the older students that there was a significant drop-off in motivation to read. And of course, I want to know why. So I began by examining my curriculum. I thought perhaps that one of the reasons was that there was a rigid required reading list and the students didn't really have a lot of options. The teachers were choosing the books that the students read. So adolescents, of course, they like to be in control of their own learning. So I began my research and I found an article by Valerie Lee, and the article is entitled Becoming the Reading Mentors Our Adolescents Deserve, Developing a Successful Sustained Silent Reading Program. And Valerie Lee conducted a single case study with her high school juniors. She had a class of 20 students, and she did find success in implementing a silent sustained reading program. And what I found interesting was that she began to trust her student reading choices. And I thought that was very important, and that really influenced me. As we continued our week 5 readings on adolescent motivation, the picture article, Assessing Adolescent Motivation to Read, that article mentions that understanding what motivates teens to read could be key to improving reading instruction. And it talks about how teachers need to expand their concept of text to include electronic media and adolescents' own cultural and social understandings. So choice is crucial to motivating adolescents, as well as offering engaging activities in the classroom, such as book clubs and literature circles. Our other reading for week 5, Fostering Reading Motivation, the Gambrill and Codling article. That article also reinforced for me the idea that choice is very important. Students need to be in control of their own learning in order to foster intrinsic motivation. And after all, that is what the goal of my literacy inquiry is. I want the students to enjoy reading and to have a love for reading and be intrinsically motivated. So I began to think about the concept of developing a silent sustained reading program, but as my inquiry took shape, Dr. Madden helped me realize that perhaps this was too broad a scope for a single plan of instruction. So I began to think about what I could do to make the students excited about reading again. So I came up with the idea of holding a book festival for my junior high students. Now the book festival would actually be a culminating activity of an 8-day plan of instruction. So my first day of my plan of instruction, for my first 42-minute period, which is the amount of time I have with my students, I would model something called a memory box. Now the students would be required to make one of their own, but I believe that good teaching includes modeling, so I would model one myself. They could use any type of box they want. They could just have a plain old shoebox or decorate it to personalize it. But inside the box, they need to include some books that they have very vivid memories of. They could be positive memories or negative memories, but preferably through modeling, I would like to show them, because I'm trying to generate excitement about reading, I'm trying to show them books that I have good memories about. And I would begin with my childhood with one of my favorites, The Poky Little Puppy, which I remember reading with my parents. And when I learned to read on my own, I would also read it over and over, and I just found great pleasure in this book. And another book I enjoyed reading as a child, Iris Sleeps Over. And I think what drew me to this book was the fact that the main character is going on a sleepover right next door at his friend's house, and he's debating whether or not to take his teddy bear. He doesn't know whether that he's going to be embarrassed and his friend's going to make fun of him. Well, I had a favorite stuffed animal growing up too that I was very fond of, so I really connected with this character. As I grew older and I got into more chapter books, I loved horses. So of course I loved the Black Stallion series, and there was just so many books in this series. I read every single one and thoroughly enjoyed it, so I would have to share my memories of that. One of my favorite books, which I have the pleasure of reading with my 9th grade students today, is To Kill a Mockingbird. Every time I read it, I get something different out of it, and the message is so timeless, the characters are so powerful, the way Harper Lee describes the setting of Macomb, Alabama, which is based on her real experiences of growing up in Monroeville, Alabama. It's just timeless to me, and this book really means a lot. I remember when my brother was assigned to read it. He's 5 years older than I am, but he was in high school when he read it, but he offered it to me, and I just felt so thrilled that I got to read a book that my older brother was reading. So no memory box for me would be complete without To Kill a Mockingbird, The Black Stallion, Ira sleeps over, and of course the pokey little puppy. And students are invited to include other objects in their memory box in addition to books, and my memory box would not be complete without a picture of my favorite high school English teacher, Mr. Carr, and this is exactly how I remember him. Not a lot of frills, the classroom didn't have a lot of decorations, but they didn't need any. It was just Mr. Carr and the book and his enthusiasm. He even made Moby Dick interesting, and I didn't think that was possible, and I still enjoy reading this book to this day. So that I would include all this in my memory box, and I would model with my students my memories that are attached to this. Of course, they are not required to have actual copies of the books if they can't get them. That would be ideal, but they could have some type of visual representation of the book. And they would be required on that first day after I model mine to begin planning theirs. So on day one, they begin planning their memory boxes, and I would ask them to go home for homework and to work on creating something that they could bring in. So days 2 and 3 of my 8-day lesson plan would be the presentation of the memory boxes. So they would bring them in and they would present them to their classmates and really try to reconnect with what they have loved about reading in the past. And that's the whole impetus for this project. And on day 4, after their memory boxes have been presented, I would ask them to get together in small groups of about 2 or 3, and they would have to talk about what books they enjoyed and things that they enjoyed about the books, really to generate discussion of books. And maybe they can connect with their classmates on things they enjoy about reading. And that would be the beginning of the period. And towards the end of the period, I would take them down to our school library and ask them to perhaps to explore and see if they could find other books on those topics that interest them, or perhaps even books by other authors or by the same author that they didn't know were available to them. If they're wandering the library and can't find anything, I would direct them to the computers. If they go on Amazon.com and they search for the books that they have remembered from their past, Amazon makes book recommendations. So I would ask them to create a list of recommendations based on the books that they search. And for days 5, 6, and 7, they will begin planning of the culminating activity of a book festival. This would be the culminating activity, and they would have to create a display. I really imagine this as something where it's like an actual spring fling or some other type of real book festival that a town might hold, where there are vendors and there are displays. So each student is responsible for creating a book display. So on days 5, 6, and 7, they begin working on, or they'll begin and continue working on their book festival. They have to have a display. They can create some type of PowerPoint presentation. They could write a song about their books. I really want it to have a carnival-like atmosphere at the festival, and I want it to be fun. So the emphasis is on them creating some type of visual representation of the book for other students to see. And then on day 8, the final day of our plan of instruction, we are going to hold our book festival. And in the book festival, like I said, I want it to be a carnival-like atmosphere, so there will be food and refreshments and music. And I would like the students to create a brochure based on their book, so something that other students can take away when they go to their booth. So this is a multimedia concept I have envisioned for my students. They would have access to computers in the planning process of their book festival display, so that they could create a brochure, something along these lines. This would be something for To Kill a Mockingbird, and then on the inside, whatever book they enjoyed, they would talk about the author, maybe have a summary of the plot of the book, so something that their fellow students could take away with them as a physical representation of the books. So that is my 8-day plan of instruction culminating in a book festival. And I've designed this with a particular group of what Tavani would call resistant readers in mind, a particular group of 8th grade students that I teach, but I think it would work well at any level, and it could be adapted for any level. So that's just some thinking behind my plan of instruction, and that is my goal, again, once more, is to motivate students to read and also to remind them what they loved about reading in the first place.